Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Challenges in the Streets here from the Public Safety Training Academy. Before we get into today's episode and I introduce our panel, we just have a couple of reminders and housekeeping items. So, as usual, if you're a chief officer and you need COPDI credits, please remember to sign in the JOT form that you can access from Quick Links. It's scheduled to be a 60-minute episode, and we'll try to keep it as close to that as possible. We are monitoring the chat also, so if you have any questions for myself or the panel as we go along, please just type them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as we go through our subjects here. One reminder before we get into the episode, the blood drive that's upcoming, I'm going to be at headquarters. You can see up on your screen on July 15th. So see the form that was sent out by Chief Dugan, follow the instructions there, and please try to make it out to donate blood. That said, we'll introduce our episode and our panel here. So as Challenges in the Streets, we have the Recruit Training Office here with us to kind of discuss some items related to probation. So we have RC 56 that's about to graduate and come out into the field. So we brought two of the members of the RTO here to kind of discuss some expectations that you should have of the probationary employees coming out, a little bit about the recruit training program here at the Academy, and then the second half of probation, which is really what we're going to focus on, is what happens out in the field. So our panel is Captain Jim Falise, who's the RTO captain, and Captain Pete Newman, who's on the long-term detail position here at the Public Safety Training Academy in the Recruit Training Office to kind of assist mostly with the practical training aspect and just coordination of the recruit class. So thank you guys for joining us, and just kind of help clear up some things, I think, about what the recruits come out of the Academy with and what to expect when they hit the field, and then kind of overviewing operations job, right, the second half of probation. So all that said, we'll kind of get right into it. Again, RC 56 is about to graduate on the 12th, is it? Or
July 11th.
July 11th. So very close. They'll be out in the field. If that's a Friday, they'll be out in the field on the 13th, right?
Sunday.
So everything is going to happen like normal. Obviously, most of the people out in the field have encountered having a rookie, whether they're a company officer or just another firefighter, if they've been a mentor before, helping the recruits through probation. So everybody's kind of well versed in that, but I think sometimes we lack a little bit of context as far as what the recruits come out with. I'm actually happy to moderate this one. Not that I'm not happy normally to moderate these, but being an adjunct instructor at the training academy, I have a vested interest in wanting to see that everybody does, right? Wanting to see the recruits succeed. But I get to see both sides of it, right? I've seen them out in the field. When I was parked long-term as a lieutenant, I got to mentor one fully through probation. I've hit parts of it, but then also my role here at the training academy. So I get to see both sides. So I think it's interesting and it's important that everybody kind of understands everything that goes into it. So let's talk first a little bit about the recruits when they come out of the training academy, right? So we're going to focus on a couple things. We've got a pamphlet to show you that there's a new thing, and we'll talk a little bit about what happens out in the field. But first, let's talk about what happens here, right? When these recruits come in, they come in off the streets. Most of them these days are coming in with no previous experience. So that's something as instructors of the academy and in the RTO, we've had to adjust, right, as learning styles and generations change, previous lack of previous experience, which is good and bad. But sometimes the recruits that come in now lack context a little bit more to some of our training than previous recruits. So we get all the recruits here in the training academy. They're here for 26 weeks, right? There's only so much that they can learn in 26 weeks, and there's a lot. Do you guys want to go over like a quick breakdown of everything that these recruits, most of whom have no previous experience coming in off the street, have to learn about the fire service in 26 weeks? So what are some, like, just a general breakdown of what they go through and like the order of training here at the academy for a recruit?
So in the first week, we'll start EMT, generally speaking, depends on the size of the class, but generally speaking, we start EMT the first week on Wednesday. Wednesday afternoon, they'll be in EMT, and they'll run EMT for about 7.5 to 8 weeks. And then after EMT, we jump right into fire school. We do EMT first for a couple of reasons. Get them set for fire school as far as PT-wise. The EMT portion's very academically heavy, so it fixes all of the study habits and everything that we have to get through for the length of probation. But it also kind of gets us an idea of how everything's going to work as we kind of move through getting into report writing and all that other stuff that comes along with EMT. After fire skills, it's sort of kind of a shake-up. Fire skills is about 8 weeks as well, and that's for Fire 1 and Fire 2. And then after that, we run into the rotation stuff. So you got hazmat that falls in there, EVOC, firefighter safety and survival, And there's a host of other little 1 or 2 week classes that we do kind of up to the end. We do some additional engine company stuff. We do some additional ladder truck stuff, rescue squad, skills kind of wrapped up in there. They go swim. And then we've got all of the other ancillary stuff the department requires through IT, telestaff, time cards, different stuff in their emails. When they're in recruit school, their email is locked down, so they can only see and get so much. So they open that back up as they get towards the end. They've got to do all their annual protocol and annual research updates, and that all falls within like the last 8 or so weeks. It just kind of depends. There's zero fluff time in recruit school. Every single day is used from start until finish. We don't have any extra days built in. Something happens and something's scheduled from day 1 until they graduate. The good thing that we've been able to do with this class through the fire chief and the fire chief's office was to bring back formerly Hell Night, but known as Hot Mess now. So that will be with RC 56 here, and it'll be next week, next Thursday. And that was something that was stopped in RC 43, I believe, for a bunch of different reasons. But we're happy to have that come back to be able to use that. And then we graduate typically on a Friday.
Yeah, so I think the biggest point is, right, there's really no extra time, right? There's almost too much already to cram into 26 weeks, right? So I know I've heard it before, you guys have heard it before, the overarching, recruits come out into the field, and depending on firefighter or Captain XYZ's personal expectations, right, they go, well, what did you guys teach? And this person doesn't know anything, whatever the case is, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we teach skills here at the Training Academy, right? Obviously, everything's set to a standard, and those standards they're always objective, right? There's nothing here where we can say, oh, this person, we think they should be able to do X, Y, Z this way, and they need to do a little bit better. There's a set of standards that's set by someone else, right? And we basically facilitate that base level training. I say we, it's really you guys with the adjunct instructors here. EMT, for example, right? It's Maryland EMTB, and they have to pass a national registry test, right? We don't have it. You guys don't get to change the test, right? I mean, they do periodic quizzes and things like that, whether it's fire, EMS, or whatever that. But at the end of the day, they are taught to that standard. Yep. Fire skills, that's a big one, right? And we'll get into this when we talk about the field ops or the operations side of probation. But there is individuality in terms of how Station 1 pulls a hose line or packs a hose line versus Station 14 and their complement of hose on their fire engine and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they come out with the base level training, right? And that standard is set by someone else, right? The NFPA sets JPRs for these classes. And then let's talk a little bit about MIFRE's interface, because I think a lot of people don't understand that, right? Like, kind of, how does MIFRE play into it? So can you explain that a little bit, either Jim or PD? Like,
so
what do
we still use
with?
For firefighting, Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2, we still use the MIFRE curriculum, okay? We still match all their PTIs. We have extra hours because the recruit class is going to be it's a longer time than a nights and weekends class, which is Fire 1's built for. But we also have a larger class size. So a Fire 1 class for MIFRE is built for a 25 student max. And when you get to 25, that does kind of push it for nights and weekends. If we're doing 40, we're still trying to get those reps in and still trying to meet all those PTIs. We still will meet all the PTIs. We still will meet all the skill sheets, all that stuff. It's just trying to get in more reps. And the other thing that the field, and we see this in the first couple of months of, oh, they didn't do this. They're also entry-level firefighters.
Right, and we talk about that a lot with like pulling and especially pulling, packing hose lines, right? We have to teach the recruits from square one, right? So while we do teach the MIFRE program, right? Because that's the program gets us, we are accredited, but that's the program that gets them a certification, right?
Correct.
To be able to say that they're they can apply for Pro Board to be a Fire 1, Fire 2. They've met all these JPRs. We have to test them to that standard too.
And
so
everything's a critical fail point or a time.
Right. So again, we talk about objective testing marks. So MIFRE, when they test now, they bring in an outside tester. Right? You guys don't see the tests, right? None of our instructors see the tests, right? It's incumbent on us as instructors and then the recruits themselves to study the material and pass this test that we have no knowledge of. It's
correct on the written test.
Yeah. And then practical testing, same thing, right? We have the testing sheets, and it's, hey, have you done this particular skill this particular way in this amount of time, right? And that's it, right? There's no gray area.
And we track each individual recruit in how many times they do skills. You know, because as somebody's maybe struggling with a skill, they'll say like, "Oh, I've only done that once or twice." I'll pull the form right up and said, "You did it this day, this day, this day, this day, in this rotation," to make sure that we're getting enough reps and we're giving everybody fair and equitable balance, and that we're trying to get them to a standard and all look the same and all working the same. The nice thing about our system is we can kind of Montgomeryize it with the MIFRE program here, and that's what we do with the syllabus.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest difference, right, as far as when somebody takes a class through MIFRE at one of the satellite locations or headquarters right throughout the state, is they're being taught that program, and we utilize that program at that base, and I can speak for safety and survival because I'm a lead for that. We teach, we use the base MIFRE program, but then like you said, we have a full week of that class, whereas normally it's a 30-hour class or whatever. I have them 5 days that week. So we get to touch on our IRP, right, our Mayday procedures, our rapid intervention procedures, all that kind of stuff. So we do get to individualize it with the recruits, so they should have a more intimate knowledge of how to integrate into Montgomery County, which is great. They're not just getting the base program, but at the end of the day, everything is built around those base programs so they can obtain that certification. I think the one thing we lack, and we'll talk about it more when we talk about the second half of probation, is the context, right? We are teaching them base skills. You guys are teaching them the most basic skills. They lack context for a lot of that stuff.
Correct.
Right, which they get out in the field, which we'll talk about that more later. So I guess at the end of the day, the overarching points is, right, they're taught, they leave the training academy with a base level of training in order to be able to function as a productive member of a crew, right, with other people. We don't operate alone in the fire service, right? So they can integrate with that crew. They should have a working knowledge of the county, what goes on in the county, not get themselves hurt or killed, right? I mean, that's not our goal, right? That's not I don't want to say it's the standard, but we need to make sure that they can go out and safely operate as a member of the crew.
Yeah, wear all their safety gear, wear all their PPE correctly,
Right.
wear their SCBA when they're supposed to wear it, correct.
Yeah, and there's not, like you said, you both alluded to, there's not enough time to go over every scenario they can possibly encounter. So they get these skills, and it's incumbent once they get out in the field for everybody to kind of help them put it all together, basically.
We do the best that we can with making sure that they understand Montgomery rules and policies, the IRP. So, Lieutenant Hall does all the classroom didactic portions of that, and his slides shows he's rewritten. So we use MIFREs, but we have to rewrite them to add Montgomery into them. So we speak specifically to our turnout gear, specifically about our SCBA, even though we have to talk about all of the stuff in the standard. We still talk specifically about the things that we can specifically for Montgomery. So when we talk about running assignments, they are our running assignments. When we talk about engine layouts, they are our engines that we use. We don't talk about what somebody else is using in another county. We try and use everything that we can to give the recruits the best understanding of what they're going to get to when they get to the field. Same thing is down here. We give some very basic skills, and when they leave, it's kind of up to the field to make sure that if they want to take it farther, that they can get it farther from the very basics that we give them here.
Yeah, I think that's a good overview. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on about the RTO program and what the recruits leave here with? Now, say they're about to leave here. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on before we kind of get into them coming out into the field?
At the end, so the classes that we run at the end are really more enhanced skills. So when I talked about the engine and the truck and the rescue squad skills, they are more enhanced, meaning we go into some, for engine example, we go into some nozzle forward stuff, how to control the hose, how to move the hose while flowing water. And people always ask, well, why can't we do that in Fire 1? We're still held to a standard to some degrees while we're in Fire 1. And when we're not teaching to certify and we're just teaching to train, we can kind of open the boundaries up a little bit. So we cannot go into some of the stuff that nozzle forward goes into, for example, because of the standard that we're kind of constrained to. But that's why we like to add that at the end to give them a better opportunity to move hose line, to throw ladders, to do forced entry, to do search, to cut on a car, to stabilize a car, whatever it is, outside of the parameters of the MIFRE course.
And I think a good way to like look at that is the last quarter of recruit class basically is more of that like transition phase.
It's the
right?
blends.
Yeah, that's where
You're blending the book with the street.
right, where it is more. That's a good way to put it. Right, it's more rather than just certification. We're now training, right? So and they do get that. And this program has evolved, right? It's evolved. I think I don't know how long I've been teaching here, maybe 8 years or so. I think it's evolved a ton in that 8 year, and it constantly evolves, right? You guys are constantly evolving the program as far as the recruit training ends, then eventually the probation packet, right? It's all constantly evolving and improving, and we're doing the best we can to adjust with the times, the learning styles, and what we think or what you guys feel is important for them to come out with. So, yeah. So again, that's like the last quarter, right? So they're in that phase now where they're blending some of that stuff. We're about to transition into the field. They recently got their station assignments, right? The recruit class. So, Petey, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how that's going now, as far as when they get their station assignments and what they're getting?
Okay. So before we would just give them, they'd be in the classroom, and you would either question them on like a quiz on fire or EMS or protocol, and if they get it right, then you would give them their station assignment, stuff like that. Now we go over more like expectations. We put together a brochure that the fire chief wanted us to work on. We got that done. It's tips for starting your career with MCFRS.
You guys want to put that up on the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
So it's a trifold panel, so just bear with me as we go up and down. But the first thing that they see is the congratulations that you'll see there on your left, and they'll get their station and shift assignment, okay? And then you have a little speech from the fire chief, giving him his expectations and congratulating them. And then on the back is contacting your station officer. We do advise them to call their station officer multiple times throughout the academy. Now, I will tell you, there are times where station officers will say, the recruit will call and say, hey, I would like to come in before the shift starts, get to meet everybody. There are times where station officers say, nope, we'll just see you the first day. Okay, and that's fine too. But it's up to them to contact the station officer in the shift, and they have all that information. If we could put that back up real quick. Yep. And then if we go down the bottom panel,
Maybe.
Can you guys flip to the other side of that? Do you have it? There you go.
there we go. So what this does is it breaks down basically what to do before your shift. So again, email or call your station officer. Basically what to wear in your first shift, because that's not really written anywhere. So we talked with operations, and all the recruits will or the probationary firefighters will show up in a Class C uniform. Okay, we go over how to check telestaff and that stuff. Go over what to bring on your first day, because everybody gets told a little different when they call the station.
We've all heard the stories where people graduate the academy and didn't realize that they had to sleep at the firehouse, right? I mean, it's like it's stuff you take for granted. But it's stuff that maybe not everybody realizes.
Yeah, they didn't know to bring bedding or anything like that, or to ask what size mattress. Because yes, we have a bunch of single mattress, but you have tall. It depends on what station you're at and how thick the mattresses are. So save them a little bit of money so they get the first set of linens correct. Also meals, some stations, the range goes from some do lunch and dinner, some just do dinner. So we talk to them about that. In the middle is the first 4 shifts. The first 4 shifts are non-staffing, but they can still act as a firefighter. They are still certified to do all that. So it's not just I'm riding along like I did last year before I got hired. You can still function. You just don't count for staffing till you know the flow. Also talks about how to properly relieve someone. Also goes over to make sure that you learn other folks on other shifts, not just your shift. Okay, so a lot of folks, it takes them 2 or 3 months, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know so-and-so from C shift. So again, not only learning your shift, but learning the other shifts and the workflow of your station. All right, and then the implicated. The implicated is all the things that were like tradition that we would do, but they were never written down. Okay, we do speak about it in recruit class. We do talk about it in what's called a station realities talk that they get towards the end.
And who does that with them? Who does that talk with them?
So we bring in past award winners from recruit classes. for them to speak to.
So it's more like a peer discussion.
Correct.
basically.
We have some rules. We try to keep it as a fire two. Somebody that's just recently graduated, we're not going to reach back to 20 years ago for somebody that we try to do it from somebody that's just recently graduated, and it changes. So as what happened 5 recruit classes ago may not be kind of what's going on. So we try and keep the most recent recruit classes with those award winners, and it seems to be pretty well taken. And the recruits, when we ask them, the firefighters, when we ask them to come back, we always have pretty good luck with bringing people in. And like I said, we just try and keep it rotated so it's not the same thing for the same person over and over again.
Yeah, and we leave the room. We let them have an open, honest discussion about what they've just went through for their last 6 months to a year, depending on recruit classes. And that's what the last page does. It goes over just basically like how to be the good expectations for a probationary firefighter. And we've all seen the posters with like 30 things listed and stuff like that. But this is, we did a survey with all the captains over the last year, got their expectations, got expectations from other counties, and just kind of compiled them all and then came out with this brochure.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it's a good intro, right? It's a good, I guess, standard format to give that to them in. And I think another important note is not to say that as a captain, right, receiving a rookie, you can't have your set of expectations, right?
Correct. I mean, I personally believe that each officer should have their own set of expectations.
And they should all obviously align with the county's, the fire department's expectations, the fire chief's expectations, and all those that are laid out in there. Again, you guys polled there, like that is the executive summary, I guess, right, of everybody's expectations, and there's still going to be a little bit different here and there, some nuances that are station dependent and whatever else. But at the end of the day, I think it gives them a good start, and it's something that we lacked for a long time. So,
and talking about the operational core values that are in the IRP.
Yeah,
we talk about that with them.
And this is the first class that's getting this, right?
Yes,
it's brand new. So.
They just got it last week, I believe.
They just got it last week.
And if anybody's curious about, is this published anywhere where people can find it? If they're curious about everything that's in there that they couldn't just read up there, is that something that just like, hey, ask your rookie if they?
You can ask the rookie, and I can check with Chief Burns to see if we can put it on the RTO page.
People might be curious.
I'll probably put it on 56's recruit training page or whatever for when they go for all their probation stuff. I'll try to put it on that page so they can see it.
Cool, and we'll talk about that in a second where everybody can find all that information that's specific to this recruit class. So, all right, cool. Anything else in the pamphlet? Or
nothing else on the pamphlet.
I think it's just super general.
Yeah.
It's not specific, so it's not specific to your firehouse. This person has no clue of what the firehouse is like, and they just spent 26 weeks in school again, and now what's the transition? So this is what that is for. It's for just touching the water as far as what the station's expectations are. That's for you to provide them. This is just hey, this is what you need to be prepared for day one and for the first couple of days. After that, it's really on the station officer to provide those ongoing expectations in the field for what, this doesn't talk about their writtens. This doesn't talk about, duties in the station. This is just a very basic, hey, you're going to have to do this. Oh, and you need this as well when you get out there.
All right.
And also to let them know that everyone's doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
Before, it would just be like, oh, you come to our station, and like, okay, well, the last rookie, they do this, and this. And that person doesn't know if it's just them or, no, this whole class does this.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's I think it's a great start. So I think it's a good segue into the second half of probation, right? So we talked about their time as a recruit here at the academy, and now they're not a recruit, they're a probationary firefighter, right? So now they're in the field. The second half of probation really belongs to who? I mean, it's not really the RTO anymore, right? It's operations.
It's essentially an operations, right? RTO is here to help if there's some questions, but from the day they graduate, they start in the field, they switch from human resources, if you will, and they're in operations. So how you as the station officer, the captain, or the preceptor wants to run everything is really up to the field. It's not, we'll gladly assist, but it's up to you to kind of take the reins and continue the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, and we all have a vested interest in the successful outcome, right? The successful learning and these probationary employees coming off probation. So, like you said, there is a lot of individuality still with it. Even though there's a pamphlet now, right? That doesn't mean there's no individuality to probation and what's going to occur at the station. So, Do you want to talk about timeline and stuff like that now, where to find that information if obviously they're going to have a printed copy.
Correct.
The rookies coming out, right, the probationary firefighters, but where can everybody, you want to just talk about the section on quick links and everything where they can find the
Yeah,
field?
so quick links, if you click on the PSTA and then you click on recruit training, on that page that'll pop up, you will see like their recruit class and their flags and stuff like that. If you click on the class flag, it'll show a picture. And then at the bottom there, that's all the probationary information. So everything on the left is the modules that you will see. So that's all of their written stuff that needs to be completed, as well as any practical stuff. Everything that's on the right is general information. So it's the probationary timeline. It's what's going to happen during their probation, how they should, when days they're going to have specific things turned in on. So there are like 6 or so modules. The 7th is the CRR module, which doesn't have a timeline. It just needs to be done within probation. And there are some other general information things there to help you proceed through. If you can't find anything, by all means, please send an email to the RTO, to one of us, call, it doesn't matter, we'll assist with whatever's needed. But that's sort of kind of most of the questions can be answered within that information. We very rarely have people that come up with a question, we're like, oh, we didn't think about that. But if there's something there, we'll gladly adjust or edit or whatever needs to be done to make sure everybody's good with understanding the process.
Cool. And then the modules and everything, it's still the same as it's always been, as far as you said, 6, 7 modules, right?
Yep.
And they can be done in any order.
They can be done in any order. It depends on you as the station officer, how that works, how that happens. Riding assignments, all that stuff comes from what you do. We've talked to people who don't have an ambulance, so they have a medic unit, and they need that probationary firefighter to be an EMS driver. So that's what they jump right into first, is the EMS driving module, which is fine. That's up to the station officer to set that, preceptor, whatever it is. 2 fire, 2 EMS. There's a general knowledge one. There's an EMS unit driver one, and then the CRR one is also in there.
That's a good overview of the requirements and everything. And then obviously when they're all said and done, they need to have become an EMS unit driver, completed all their written and practicals.
Yep.
The IPE, right? They come back. Can you just talk briefly about what the testing entails when they come back?
So probationary testing is at the end. They'll get some emails from me that say, hey, this is when you're coming. It's typically on their first offgoing, the first day offgoing. They'll arrive here. They're paid overtime for while they're here. They'll take the written test, and then they'll report to the gym for the IPE. The written test is everything during probation. We change essentially the test every single class. Right now it's sitting at about 65 questions, but it goes up and it goes down as we edit things, change things. This fire chief joiner order comes out, that rule has changed, so we will change and edit it as it goes. If we see that there's problems with something and somebody says, hey, we need to check on this, then we'll put some questions in there as well for that. And then their IPE test is simply nothing more than kind of a rundown or watered down CPAT. It's the same thing that we've all taken. All of that information is right in the probationary timeline and the probationary instructions. It shows you everything that they're going to have to do, provides the time. They'll come down after the test, go right into the IPE, and then they're done for the day. And then typically the following week is when the actual practical probationary tests will be EMS and fire. They're detailed up here on a piece of apparatus. Takes roughly a half hour or 40 minutes, depending on how everything's working. They run through some fire skills, they run through some EMS stuff, and they'll get a grade. And then if there's any problems that arise, we'll address those and get a retest or a remedial or whatever needs to be done. And then that paperwork is both submitted to the station officer and the probationary firefighter, as well as operations. So all of the docs, and then Chief Coletti and Chief Fabrizio get the same thing.
Cool. Yeah. So I think that's a good overview of their time out in the field. Let's talk a little bit about the checkoffs and stuff real quick, because I just had the opportunity to look at the fire checkoffs for this class. Right. Again, very similar to what we've always done, but I think this is where the individuality is important, and it's good, right, in terms of what happens station to station from probationary employee to probationary employee. So some of the skill, they're not all encompassing, right? Again, there's going to be things that are more critical to know at station 14 and not as critical if they're at station 2, right? Just differing areas, different apparatus, all that kind of stuff. So Some of those checkoffs are kind of vague, right? And you might hear somebody, well, what does this mean, or what exactly does this involve? Well, it's not objective testing, right? It's guidelines basically of these are the things that the probationary employees should be able to accomplish. Now, to what degree or to what level that's going to be a little bit more subjective based on a myriad of things, right? I think there's more just important points to note that every individual has a different learning style, right?
Correct.
And so I think when you get the probationary employee, and again, I'm not going to tell anybody how to manage their probationary employee, but I think it is important to try to pick up on that early, right? And just, again, from an instructor perspective, we try to do it as much as we can here, but pick up on those learning styles and try to embrace them and cater to them as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying, cater to the probationary employee and whatever, right? I'm not trying to spin that in a different way, but try to understand what they need to be successful and make it their own, right?
Correct.
Give them what they need to be successful in those checkoffs. Another note. Go ahead.
Just get hands on the equipment. If you're a probationary employee, you have a probationary employee, they need to be pulling a hand line twice a pay period, at the minimum. That's at the minimum. Now I understand that you get busy on ambulances and units, but we got to keep our hands on the equipment. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and so adding that context to the
Yes.
training, I think, is huge, right? Whether it's fire or EMS, right? EMS, so you can take EMT. If you have no practical experience delivering EMS in the field, riding a transport unit couldn't be more different than sitting in EMT class, right? I mean, learning those interpersonal interactions, right? And how to actually interact with the patients and ask your sample questions in an appropriate way, like all that kind of stuff. You get in that flow, but there's no substitute for doing it.
No.
All right. You don't get good at being an EMT by taking EMT at the training academy.
No.
You don't get good at riding the line in a
100%.
fire engine by
100%.
pulling lines here. There's nothing we can do
Correct.
here to substitute.
I can't
for that
move the
experience
buildings.
and
I
the
can't.
context.
I can't get a split foyer.
Right. So I would just implore people as you get these probationary employees to add the context of the training.
Yep.
Something we talk about at the very end in safety and survival, which is one of the last classes they take. We give an overview of things that are important to their safety and survival on the fire ground specifically, and two of those things are building construction and fire behavior. All right. So using building construction for an example, right? When you go, everybody's first due area is different, right? So getting them to learn those buildings in your first due, right? Somebody may have never stepped foot in what we would, the commonly accepted terminology for a garden department in Montgomery County, right? Take them out there, explain to them the different layouts,
Exactly.
right? Look at a Cape Cod, right? They learned in a PowerPoint for a couple hours in the classroom what a knee wall was.
Right.
Does that mean anything to them? No, they have no context for that. So go out there, look at when you're stretching hand lines to the vacant house in your first due or whatever it is, like point out, oh yeah, this is a dormer. This is where
Show
the
them
knee
what
walls
floor
is.
joists are.
Right.
Show them what lolly columns are. Show
Right.
them what's holding them up.
If you're doing a walkthrough of a construction site, right? The stuff like that is invaluable, and I still fight with it, right? Take for granted what people know, right? When you run these fire alarms with recruits, right? Explain to them what you're doing, right? We all get guilty of just walking in, hitting acknowledge on the alarm panel, hitting silence. Oh yeah, it was that smoke detector over there. Hitting well, how did you know what smoke detector that was? Well, the solid red light was lit up. Oh, they never knew that.
Exactly.
Try to add the context in everything you do, right?
And it's such a broad range of folks. We have 18-year-olds to about 52, 55-ish, and it's such a broad range of life skills. And that's some of our hard parts here is getting everybody on the same page just to read a tape measure.
Right.
And then go from there.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing that I've learned in the last couple of years being up here.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really good points. I had a couple little like soapbox things that I had, but I think are all important things to talk about and for people to try to realize or just keep in mind, right, as they're going through.
And just like you said, different looks. Don't just pull the engine out front to do the checkout and say, yeah, pull the line here to the front door over and over again.
Right.
Get them out and get different looks. Explain to them because they know how to pull hose. We've been working on that for the last
We pull hose a lot.
Last 2
But
years.
I'm sure there's going to be times where it's going to appear that we didn't touch it once, depending on.
But
Correct.
cars being in the way, medians, things that I can't do here,
Right.
or we can't set up for the day, that you can do in the field.
Yeah. Yeah, all really good points. A couple other things related to as we're going through these checkoffs right out in the field, they're interacting with other station personnel, the public, everything else. So let's talk a little bit about documentation, right? What are the expectations for documentation as far as formally and informally? Like, can you just speak to that a little bit?
So is the documentation for their written portions, right? You decide on how many times they have to throw something. You decide on how many times they have to do certain skill for a checkoff. If you're happy with it at one, then so be it. That's your checkoff. As far as the written stuff, just as Capt Newman just said, we're getting people from all different walks, all different job application processes, all different processes of life. We've had people from graduating high school 2 days, 3 weeks before started recruit school, and we have people that have retired from another occupation and wanted to try something different. How those people write, how they articulate their thoughts is going to be different. We are not English scholars, but if you want to hold them to that, then by all means, you may hold them to that. Just understand that if they don't have that formal education, you're fighting an uphill battle with some of that stuff. The content is really what the written portion is there for, to make sure they understand what this SOG says, what this rule means, what this part of the IRP states, what are they supposed to do here, what channel are they supposed to be on. That's what that written stuff is, the understanding and the ability to absorb the information to be able to then use it again sometime.
And know where to find that information is huge too. Just
Correct.
getting
Yes.
them in it, right? So I would implore.
And getting them to go over quick links.
Yeah, and I am not I mean, I'm only 38, right? But I'm not into like Chat GPT and stuff like that, right? Please implore them, and the written stuff, like you said, is what it is. Implore them. I think the biggest issue I've seen, or like probationary employees getting into trouble, is on the written stuff. Implore them to do the work, right?
Correct.
Like
their own work.
their own work. Find the information, right? You teach them where to find the information.
Yep.
Make sure they know how to work quick links and where to find all the appropriate information. But do the work on their own, right? And again, it sounds like they should be doing that, and it should be a given, but it's not. We've known over time it's not a given, right? Nope. Do the work, put it in your own words. Even you don't have to be a scholar, right? Nope. We just want to know that you can find the information.
You understand the leader's intent.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
So other documentation stuff. So that's for the written, the skills checkoffs. It's just a sign off. Yep. They get an IPPA. Obviously, it's another form of formal documentation, right at the end of probation. In between there, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. What should officers and others be doing as far as documentation?
So if we have, ultimately, not everybody is going to be a 100% rock star. They're not going to come out and they're not going to do everything correct. We learn the best from the mistakes that we make. But if we have one that was able to make it through and there's concern that they may not be able to continue, that's really up to the station officer to document. And that's important that you document that information, from an objective standpoint. You can't just say this person stinks and they shouldn't be here. This just doesn't work, right? You have to be able to articulate your words to say that, hey, they need work on this. And additionally, just because they can't pull a hand line right 3 times, but they can do it right 10 times, doesn't mean that they're a bad employee, right? Work with them, work to get through all of that stuff. If you're still having problems, then you need to document said problems, whether it's a note to file, whether it's on the counseling report, a DOR, whatever you as the station officer, your battalion chief, the doc, all decide on, and what your intent with it is. Is it because they won't be able to get through probation, or is it they're just struggling with one portion and we have to change the direction of how we're doing this specific portion of probation? Is EMS a struggle, so we need to focus a little bit more on it? So that just has to be documented, and then everybody has to be aware of it. You can't drop this on your battalion chief's lap at the end of probation and go, oh, by the way, this person shouldn't come off probation. It just doesn't work that way. You're gonna have a huge uphill battle that way. Everybody needs to kind of be aware, including the employee. So the person, that recruit or that probationary firefighter needs to understand that they're not meeting the mark, that you're expecting A and they're giving you B or C. They have to understand that. And then you have to give them a way to get to A so they can, get there. Understand it may not be to your standard, but if it meets the mark, that's the difference. We all have certain expectations. Some people aren't going to be able to meet our expectations, but are they going to be a good employee for the department, but they just can't get this specific skill out? Then, that's up to you all to determine in the field of whether it needs to continue or they don't, they can't continue.
Right. If there is a problem, they need to have an objective pathway to success, right? And there's going to be people, there's going to be recruits when they're here, and there's going to be probationary employees when they come out that just, they cannot meet those objective expectations of the organization. Again, it's not this person's subjective opinion, it's that whole group and the expectations of the organization. And that's, documentation is important to that, right? It's important to the success of the organization, to the health and safety of the member, and to the public, right? So we need to do a good job documenting. I know, me included, as supervisors, I think we lack in that department of good documentation, right? Maybe not you guys because you deal with it all the time, every day, but I think out in the field, we lack that. So things like, if you give a DOR, that obviously needs to be done, and needs to be done correctly, good or bad, right? Correct. DORs don't have to be bad.
Don't have to be bad.
That is a form of formal documentation, right? Supervisory notes are huge. Keeping those, right? You're allowed to keep supervisory notes. It's encouraged, right? Again, performance, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. And obviously, if something rises to the level of, formal discipline, if it came to that point, we have to follow that process. But we're just talking about day-to-day kind of things. Do a good job documenting, because it can come in handy if
have the probationary firefighter write their account of said training or of said episode and see what they say, right? You may learn something different from that. We do that, and we see constantly that we didn't look at it from that direction. We looked at it from our direction.
I mean, even their journal entries, right? So they do, that's a form of their documentation, right? And I think that's telling, right? People kind of blow them off a little bit sometimes, but I think that can tell you what's important to them, or what they might be struggling with or enjoying, or whatever the case might be, by reading them and paying attention.
And the journal's not the second logbook. Don't write down just, I went on these calls and I did housework. Every day the employees should be writing what they're picking up on, what they're learning, how they're progressing. I love that, all the rookies that we would have, or when I was in the field, have, every day they brought something, whatever unit they're riding, they're bringing something down to explain it to us, so that we know that they have a good depth understanding of it. And then put that in the journal. I went over the clapboard Siamese today, figured out this.
Teach back is a huge. That's a huge form of reinforcement
and it just
and
helps
learning.
all the other firefighters at the table.
Yep, that was going to be my next point. Absolutely.
That's the beauty of probationary testing. It does help everybody at the table. Including the officers.
Yeah, it makes everybody. That's why I like teaching. I learn something every day, right? I've learned stuff from recruits who have no experience before teaching a skill, and then I see them do it a different way, or I'm like, oh, I never thought about doing it that way. And so you learn something every day. I think it makes everybody better. We tell them, depending on the skill, hey, you might be the subject matter expert in this. This might not be something that people have done recently, right? So it's going to be good for everybody to go through it. All right, you might have learned this a different way than the person who went through recruit school 20 years ago. It doesn't mean either way is wrong, but you might have the opportunity to actually teach something, informally, teach somebody else something they didn't know. So
absolutely,
skills change. We try to be transparent with that, but skills change. How we viewed something, how we decide that we're going to do this, it changes. So if you see a recruit that comes out and it's different than what you've seen before, certainly question it and ask. And
please ask them.
You'd be surprised.
And they can reach out to you guys, right?
Absolutely.
If it's something like, hey, this person shouldn't need this way. It doesn't make sense to me. Is that what they
were
taught?
And we see that with some of the nozzle forge stuff. We see that with some high shoulder ladder stuff. Search. We're going through a big revamp of search right now. Building out some more stuff here at the academy for that. But that is one of the things that we as an office, as an academy, have to work on, is keeping an updated list of these are things that are changing, because you as the 5, 10, or 15-year guy, girl, might not know that that's changing. You go, oh, you're doing it wrong than what we were taught. But we don't know how to, we have to work on putting that out to the field that changes better. And we recommend that. That's on our list to do, of how how as we update recruit classes, how do we tell the field in a quick, efficient way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to say we struggle with it, but it's a challenge that
it
we
is.
have even here too,
Yes.
right, amongst instructors.
Yes.
We have a standard way that generally that we teach things. We all have our little nuances, and you might get a recruit, you're teaching a skill, and you say, hey, what's that? Do it this way. Like, and we teach them how to constructively not question that, but bring it up to us. Like, hey, yesterday, Captain so-and-so or instructor so-and-so taught me this way. Okay, if they tell you that, that's acceptable, but just understand
Correct.
this is why I'm telling you that again, that's all that individuality, and it just expands into the field. So,
Yep.
Yeah, good stuff. I just had a couple more little bullets here. Do you have any questions that came in?
No questions.
Okay. What's the best way for if they do have like out in the field, if the preceptor or captain, whoever has a question about something like that, to contact the RTO? Email you individually, email the RTO email address. What's the preferred?
Whatever
method
they
of
feel
contact?
comfortable with. I don't think anybody would say one way or the other. So #FRS.RTO, and all the folks that are in the RTO will get that email. Or you can email us individually. It makes no difference. We receive emails all the time. Understand we're probably going to talk about it with the other ones. Hey, I got this.
Absolutely.
Is there, what do you think, X, Y, Z? But that doesn't matter. Whoever you guys feel comfortable emailing, by all means, you can email it. Somebody from the office will get back to you once we have a discussion on it, or if it's something that's kind of individual or specific, it could take a second for us to generate whatever response, but we'll get it back to you as soon as we can. But either way, it doesn't matter. Phone numbers are on the bottom of all our emails. Personal phone numbers doesn't matter. That's acceptable as well. Text.
And the office is
matter.
open. You come in if you're up here for training or something like that.
Here 12 hours a day, so come knock on the door.
Monday through forever.
Cool. So I think just to kind of wrap it up, right, it's when you get these rookies, whether it's RC56 that's coming out, RC57 is here in session right now, right? So they're going to be coming down the pipe, I guess, in the fall they'll graduate.
December 13th they'll graduate.
So, very beginning of winter. So they're going to keep coming out, or you're going to keep getting rookies. Be patient with them, right?
Correct.
Be patient. Work through the process. I know it's easier said than done, right? It's easier with some than it is with others, but it's going to be overwhelming, right? Like you said, they came out of being back in school essentially for 26 weeks from wherever they came from, and now they're coming out into an environment they might have absolutely no exposure to. So be patient with them. Understand that it's going to be overwhelming. All the little details. I think one of the biggest things is we talked about like standards and subjective versus objective and all that stuff. Just drive home the importance of having a standard, right? Them being held to that standard and paying attention to detail. I use the example of the logbook all the time, right? Like, is it in and of itself writing things, in I don't know exactly the same way and correctly in the logbook? Is that important? Well, you can argue all day long whether that specific thing is important, but it's the attention to detail, right? Not missing calls in the logbook, not putting things out of order, doing a single strike through with your fire ID to indicate a correction instead of scribbling it out. All that shows attention to detail, right? It's all important.
And builds trust.
Yeah.
As you're doing the little things at the station, and you're doing a good job at that, and you're consistent, it builds trust with the shift as you're trying to come into their shift.
Right.
So that's huge.
Cool. I think those are all the little points I have. We are pretty close to an hour already, believe it or not. So do you guys have any last little pointers?
Please pull lines and throw ladders, and you're a part of this too. It's 1 year of 6 months with us, 6 months with the field. So please, please, please get their hands on the equipment. That's what I have for my.
One of the most common questions I think we get is, who am I getting and how are they? So understand that 6 months with us and 6 months with you all is different, right? Somebody that excelled in recruit school may just excel in that academic environment, but when they get to the fire station, it's completely new and it may not be what you believe to be the greatest. Somebody that does not do well in the academic setting could excel in the field then. So we try to be as objective as we can when we get those, statements. We're not going to make a bunch of them, because let that individual come to you and make that impression. Don't take something from how we view it. Take it from them and how you view it, and give them a clean slate to start. Understand that everybody, again, is not a rock star. Everybody's not coming out to be, 100%. And the field is not 100%. We all have ups and downs. That's why we work as a group, because, this day, this one's not great. Well, this one's going to pick up the slack for that one. So it takes a lot of work to get through all of them and to make sure that they're good. And, the recruit classes aren't stopping. So, they're going to be here for a long time to continue everything, and everybody's going to have good ones and quote unquote bad ones, if you will. So learn from the good ones and learn from the ones that need a little bit more polish and to be better.
Yeah, and I think the last thing too that I have is, as these probationary employees are coming out, they only know what they know, right? And they're going to continue to do what they see, right? They hopefully have only picked up good habits here. They know the right things to do, right? I say simple, but simple things, right? They wash their hood after every burn,
Correct.
right? They get their gear washed after every burn, provided there's not one right after it, right? They decon, they rehab after every burn, right? So if you also can't have expectations of them that the rest of the shift isn't following. Okay, so and that's, again, this is just my personal note. This is not coming from the RTO or anybody else. This is me. If you have expectations of that rookie, the things you want them to do, get the shift in line with those now and have them understand that these are the maybe give the expectations that you're going to give to your rookie to the shift ahead of time, and just say, hey, like, this is the and not saying you could do a 360, right? You can't, run the firehouse like a 3-ring circus and they're expected to operate like the Marine Corps when the bells go off. I love that, that quote, right? You can't do that today, right? You can't run it like a 3-ring circus and then tomorrow say, hey, we're going to do this because we're getting a rookie. But make sure that everybody understands what you're expecting of the rookie, so that expectation is carried through everybody, whether it's their mentor or whoever, as you guys go on. So that's just my 2 cents. So, all right. Unless you guys got anything else, you don't have any questions, one last check. We are right about an hour, so cool. All right. Well, thank you guys again for taking the time to explain the new pamphlet and the probationary process. Hopefully it clears up any questions that anybody had. And that's about all we got. We have one episode we were trying to work out for the end of July. The training academy, the command lab specifically, is pretty busy in July with a bunch of checkoffs for new bump ups and stuff for battalion chiefs. So we will have at least one episode. We're still trying to schedule the boss talk for the Aurora Drive house fire. We had a couple dates we're floating around, just trying to iron that out for the end of July. That's the only thing that I have right now in the pipeline. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.